So the question is, how, as dominant societies educators, how can they create a better space for students that are in their programs, whether it's book material or writing material? It still comes down to this place of you need to learn and understand the historical impact from one generation to another. The historical impact since 1492, when Columbus came to these shores, who was the first human trafficker of our people. That was the starting of missing and murdered Aboriginal women. That is when Columbus took our relatives across the ocean. And all of the historical impacts of whatever city that the educators are being in, ask those questions. Why is there not no original people in this institution? Why are they not helping? Why are they not teaching? The history is important. The historical impact of 1492, from the War of 1812 to the Indian Act to the day schools of what the churches have inflicted upon people such as myself, the creation of residential schools for the last 7 generations of my relatives. Those schools were not created for us to prosper. Schools were created to kill us. Mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, and spiritually, they harmed us. They harmed generations of my relatives. Not just to see one video about residential school, but to sit and talk to the original people about the impact. Look at when they talk about psychology and sociologies in the educational system, they never talk about the psychology of the damage of a child that has been mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, and spiritually abused, stripped of their language, stolen and kidnapped from their families, couldn't go back to their communities, couldn't tell anybody, and then were left at institution and still not learning how to have a career. Look at that. Look at the psychology of that. What that does from one family member to another, from one generation to another. That is a deep, deep damage that these institutions have done to my relatives from one generation to another. And what those institutions taught my relatives, those institutions, those priests and those nuns and those ministers and those so-called teachers in those places who weren't really teachers, they were the parents of these children. And none of them protected those Native children in those institutions because they didn't have to. They weren't accountable to anybody. They could do whatever they wanted. Look into the psychology of going to a day school taught by priests and nuns while the priest is sexually abusing the young boys behind the altar and telling us young girls that we're whores and sluts and tramps. And hearing that all from grade 1 to grade 8. What is the psychology and the damage that that does to a child? The historical impact of the 60 scoop, where the federal government told the institutions and people of authority, go and take as many Native children as you can. So what they told them is, you go kidnap those Native children and we'll sell them and we'll adopt them out all over the world. What did that do to that child? What did that do to that mom and to that dad, to that grandparents? Let's talk about the impact of that learning. What did that do to their psyche as a human being, let alone being Nishnawik, being Hungwe, being Lenape people, on all of my relatives across Turtle Island? Let's talk about the impact of CAS. We have more Native children in care than we did in the 60 scoop. Because there is another institution who does not value Native people, do not even look at to empower the damage that they have caused from one generation to another. And they are a part of the problem also. Let's look at the psychology of what they're doing to our families and to our communities today. Let's look at the impact of the Catholic Church. I've been doing this work for almost 40 years, and there is not a Native person that I have not sat with. And the source of their sexual abuse stems from the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, and the United Church. And they're the ones that inflicted that disrespect to our bodies, our hearts, our minds, and stripped us of our spirit. So if educators want to make a better place and a safer space for Native people, they need to understand the history. From one generation to another, that fear, that distrust has been passed down because that spirit of us is passed down from one generation to another. We need to talk about that. So I think educators in all education institutions need to be taught by our people. Let's sit down and let's really create a real good training around that. So that's a little bit about what educators can do, but you need to honor and to respect the historical impact. But treat our people with respect and with integrity and kindness. But, have some knowledge keepers come to your educational places so that they can be present, so our students can see that we are visible, we are here, we are important, we have something to say, we have something to share. So with that thought, I say, miigwech and yawangoa.